Hi everyone, I'm Cheryl, the Managing Director at Media Meerkat and the host of this podcast, Media Talks, and I'm delighted to introduce one of my favourite people and one of my favourite people in the industry. She is a female powerhouse, she's a friend and a mentor, Kate Beal. Kate,
Hello.
welcome.
That's quite an introduction. Hello.
Thank you. Let's start there, shall we? So I just want to tell the audience just very quickly that Kate was, I think, the first person to ever give me my break in television. And it started in work experience. I'm trying to remember all those years ago, but I'm pretty sure I came to you pitching myself as a presenter. And you were like, "Do you know what? I think there might be some potential in you, but actually, why don't we start in production?" Am I right, or have I totally
No,
misremembered?
you were a presenter, but you were full of ideas. And it was the ideas I was like, oh, no, that's interesting. She's got a brain that's just so imaginative and entrepreneurial. So that's where we started.
And I have to say, it's rare, and it's becoming more rare, in my opinion, that people are so willing to give somebody else a break. And that you, and I speak so highly of you because you were one of the few people that gave me those opportunities. And it wasn't just at the beginning, it was throughout my whole career, which is why I say you're such a mentor to me. And I can only hope that I can do the same for somebody else in my now new career, because it's slightly different than what I did when I joined you. So let's just take a step back, and I want to talk about, so you were a big, huge influence in my career, but your mum was probably your biggest inspiration, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mum worked in television all her life, actually only retired last year. And she was a single mum from when I was the age of 4 and worked in production management, business affairs, running studios, and ended up in a very prominent position in ITV, running general manager of Meridian and the studio complex there. So I had an amazing role model in terms of a successful female in television, but also somebody incredibly, single-minded, because she was on her own as a parent and she was able to maintain, a healthy relationship with me and a healthy relationship with her work. And she was determined and she was brilliant and she succeeded. So as a role model, what better one could I have had?
Absolutely. And I mean, I've met your mum, and she's a wonderful human being. So I can see how she's helped shape you as a person. But what was your childhood like? So if your mum was this real powerhouse in TV and everybody kind of knows Jan, especially down on the south, how did that look like from your perspective growing up? And how did she balance that?
So it's interesting because it was just mum and me. I'm an only child as well, and my granny was around, so it was me, mum, and gran, and we were a unit. And I never felt excluded from my mum's work. So from a very early, well, actually, even in the womb, I know that at sort of 8 months in, 8 months pregnant, she was still out filming on a boat with me in her tummy. And I think, there's an element of I think she went back to work after sort of 3 or 4 months as well, and that was partly through necessity and partly through love of her career. And so being a single parent, she had to work, she had to earn money, she had to bring the money in and feed me. So that often meant I would be in the corner of a studio with a colouring book if she was working, and I would be, in the corner of something like Run Around. For the older people will remember Run Around as a child. I distinctly remember sort of being there watching whilst my mum was getting on with her job, or other things like, she would be going to industry events or parties, and even at the age of 7, 8, 9, she would take me with her. And I would be her plus one. So I was very lucky to be in places or scenarios that an older person would have really appreciated. And especially in the 80s, mum worked on a lot of entertainment programs, and there was a guy called Greg Dyke who then ended up being DG of the BBC. He was at TVS, which is where she worked at the time, and they were producing a lot of entertainment formats and a lot of entertainment shows. And there's another man called John K. Cooper who went on to be huge in ITV entertainment, and another very inspirational man called John Dale, who who created a show called Number 73 and other lots of crazy hits. So the people that my mum was working with were inspirational, creative people, and there were a lot of really strong females as well that my mum was working with and were friends with. So I had these people in my kind of life as my mum's friends and therefore my influences. So as a child, yes, I would be taken to grown-up events, or I'd go to a studio recording, or I'd go and see something being filmed because my mum had to take me, but also it was wonderful for me to be there to absorb it and to see it, and to understand that mum isn't being taken away from me. She's just simply doing something brilliant. So I was always very proud of what my mum did, always very proud of the things that she achieved and the things that were on TV that I could watch, and it never really felt like she wasn't there. And actually at home she had active friends and a social life at home, and again it was good because she included me where she could.
Yeah. So would you say it was inevitable that you were gonna you were gonna go into this industry? Because it was literally from before you were born, right? So
Yeah, so actually at the age of 9 I wanted to be a dress designer. My godmother was an amazing head of wardrobe and did things, did some amazing dramas. And so actually I remember wanting to be a dress designer, and in my head I wanted to work in fashion, and because that's what Auntie Rita did. But then it quickly became apparent that I wasn't quite that talented in that way. And the more I kind of grew into my teenage years, the more obvious it became that I was interested in story and editorial, and human story in particular. And actually I found something the other night. I was looking through my old school books with mum, and I found a personal statement that I wrote in year 9, and it says, when I grow up I want to be a producer director, and I'm going to go to university, and if I work really hard I think I'm going to do it. And so actually from sort of year 9 onwards I knew I wanted to be a producer director, and that's what I ended up doing.
and it was inevitable. So just talk to me a little bit about how your mum's influence then shaped you, because you're a mum, you've got 2 daughters, Nancy and Winnie, both beautiful girls that somehow you just juggle seamlessly. I mean, I have a 3-year-old and I literally have no idea how you do what you do, and you do it with a smile. But I assume that your mum, the way your mum brought you up in terms of juggling it all and seeing how she managed to raise you, and she was your mum, but she was also your best friend and your right-hand confidant, and how you've done that with your girls and run a
Yeah,
very successful business.
I think that the first question you asked, which is about role models, I think that's the most key question here. Is the thing that I realized when I had Nancy, and Nancy is now 11, is that I am her role model. And it is really important to have strong female role models in your life, and I want her to see her mum do good in the world. So that's not just doing good in my job, but that's doing good charity work, or being good to my friends, or being the best daughter I can be, as well as the best mum I can be and the best wife I can be. And so that's sort of how I approach it. It seems you look at my life and people think I do a lot, and I often get asked the question of how do you do it all. It's there's a lot of paddling, there's a lot of organization, there's a lot of arguments. I'm not perfect in any way, but equally I want to be the best person I can be, and I want to be the best person I can be for me, but also for my daughters. And I think that's very much what my mum had as well. And my mum's got this incredible steely determination, and she grew up in an industry in the 1960s that was full of smoke-filled rooms with men telling her to go and get a cup of tea and patting her on the backside. And that's the world she grew up in. And I always think of mum as sort of Peggy Olson from Mad Men. She was that intelligent, determined woman in a man's world, much more so than I have been, because I actually entered television assuming that I could rule it, because that's what my mum did. The role model I had was a very powerful woman. Mum didn't have those role models. So in terms of my approach to my children, I've had a positive experience of having a successful working mum who has juggled successfully, and so I don't see why I shouldn't give that to my daughters. And my daughters are super bright, super intelligent, and super creative. So they'll go on and hopefully do the same, or not. Actually, they may do whatever they want to do, and that's kind of the whole point. I don't want to create mini me's. I want to create whoever they are to bring out the best of themselves.
Does it bother you, and feel free to answer as honestly as I know you will do, but does it bother you that you being a mum and a woman in the industry is spoken about? Do you feel like do you think it's a moot point, that it shouldn't even be a point of discussion? Or is it important to talk about the fact that you're a woman and you're a CEO and a boss and someone who leads the industry, which you do?
I think I made a decision a few years ago to talk about it.
Okay.
It was a conscious decision to talk about being a woman. It was a conscious decision to talk about being a mum, and actually not just a mum, a working parent, because that's what we are. We're working parents, and Woodcut. I hope the men feel equally as kind of valued in their parenthood as the women do. But no, I think as I got more, as my career progressed, I realized I have a responsibility to pay it forward and to help the next generation. And if by helping the next generation means me standing up and saying I am a woman and this is what it means, then that's the best way to to do it. And I think there are an element of, sometimes I do go on my soapbox a bit, but actually it's important to just keep reminding people, because the job is not done. And when you go to America, and I went to Texas at the earlier this year, and I went and protested outside the Capitol building because of the abortion laws and the changes there, you realize that the job is not done. The job isn't even started in some places, it's regressing. And I don't want my daughters to live in a world where women are seen as second-class citizens or being controlled by the man. It was an amazing thing to go and see the Barbie movie. I'm sure you've seen it as well, and I'm sure everyone. And I took my girls to see it, and I cried twice.
Yeah.
The reason I cried twice was
I
because
literally just got shivers when you're talking about it.
and it's just like, oh my goodness, people are saying it. And and Winnie came out, and my 5-year-old doesn't know what patriarchy is, but she's got a little bit of a sense of it.
Yeah.
And my 11-year-old is even more resolute, and her kind of sort of feminist streak that is wonderfully developing in her, because this is the world she's living in, and this is the world that she's going into. So it's our job to keep shouting and make it the best world we can for our girls.
No, I talk quite openly about, so one of the questions I always get asked from candidates and from clients is, why did you leave the industry to set up your agency? And I'm in a completely different situation than you are for lots of reasons. But one of the reasons I felt like I needed to leave, if I'm being completely truthful, is because I wanted to be a mum. Now, you know that I had a real struggle to conceive. We had IVF for 3 years. I talk about it very honestly. In fact, I'll do it in client meetings. I will openly talk about the fact that I struggled to have a baby. I think it's a conversation that has to happen. But I felt, this was pre-COVID, things have changed a little bit post-COVID, but I felt like if I wanted to be with her and be present all the time, that I couldn't necessarily follow the path that I was on. You, however, have broken that mold. But I would like to talk about whether you feel like you've made any sacrifices to do that, or whether, because you do look like you've done it very seamlessly. Whereas to me, I felt like I had to make a choice. I look back on it now and I think that wasn't necessarily the case, but it was very much how I felt at the time.
I don't know, it's very difficult because I had my own company. So I am in a unique position because I have my own company, and there are positives and negatives of that. And you understood actually what I had to choose, which is you went and set up your own company. So to a certain extent, you could play by your own rules, and you made your own rules. And I have made my own rules, but I've also had an enormously supportive team around me. And you know the team I work with, but in particular working with my husband, having my mum around, and also having our head of production, Jenny, who has been there to hold my hand, lift me up, push me forward, just be supportive when I needed to be. When I first got pregnant with Nancy, it was Jenny who's holding my hair back when I'm vomiting in the office toilets.
I think she's done that on more than one occasion for lots of women.
And we always joke that we're a really good place for people to come and work after having had a baby, because we're all mums and we all understand it. We all understand that when you walk in the office you want to cry because you've left your baby. And there are sacrifices, and the sacrifice, for me, has been time spent away from my children. And I'm not talking about day to day, because actually day to day it's fine. They're having a wonderful time at nursery with granny or with their nanny or whoever. They live the best life. They get to do the bestest things. It's not like they're sitting there bored every day. And I'm working to give them as many experiences and enjoyable things that they can have. But actually, for me, it's when I go to America for a week, or if I go to France for a week for work, you know, if I go to MIPCOM or something. And in the early years, that's very, very difficult. And actually, I'm finding it interesting that Winnie's fine with it, but Nancy notices it more that mummy's not there. Yeah,
Yeah,
my
she's a bit
11-year-old,
older.
and I'm aware going into the teenage years that a year, yeah, a week away from my teenager is going to be difficult. When I was a baby, well, when I was small, mum went filming to Hong Kong for 6 or 7 weeks, and did this amazing like film shoot in Hong Kong. It's something that I would never ever, you know, ask her not to do, and I was okay with that because I was sort of 3. I'm not sure I'd have been okay with that when I was 11. So there are compromises. However, this year, for the first time ever, I managed to take my girls and Matt with me. So I had to go to America for a week and a half, and actually I extended it to just sort of over 2 weeks, and they came for a week of it with me, and I was able to take my girls to America on a work trip for the first time ever, and that was incredible.
Amazing. So that leads me on. You mentioned Matt, your husband, who works alongside you. I've known Matt for many years, a real true talent. I guess it would, whether it's the right thing for me to say or not, but there must have been people in your past, or even when you meet now, that question why he's not the front man. Why is he not the face of Woodcut Media? Why are you? Because surely as a woman with 2 children, it would be easier for him to do it.
Because he hates that kind of stuff. Yeah, you know that more than anyone.
I
Like,
do, yeah.
he is not the front man in terms of he has no desire to do the whining, dining, pitching, schmoozing that I am really good at. You know, he is a true talent, and you're right, he really is. He's super talented, and I think that's the key to our relationship is we both respect what the other does.
Mm.
We both do very different things in our roles. So he is a sort of a creative director, editor, visuals, perfectionist. I am the kind of editorial, going out pitching and running the company bit. And we have our lanes, and we stick to our lanes, and we support each other in the lanes, and we respect the fact that we're both really good.
Mm.
I have no desire to do his job, and he has no desire to do mine.
No. And the amount of times I've seen you guys, your dynamic, and at first it was quite surprising to sort of see how a husband and wife can be so in your lane, and you don't mix the business with pleasure, or at least I've never seen it, you know. And sometimes Matt is typical sort of editor, or, you know, running that sort of edit team would be like all fiery, and he'd be like this, and you would just accept it, and you would just be like, this is what he is, this is how he runs it.
I had a really wise lady, actually, one of my mom's very, very good friends, Sandy, told me a long time ago. She was coaching me in my early years of setting up my first business. And because Matt was there at the time, and he was doing things and I was doing things. And I remember her saying to me, I was getting really frustrated that he just hadn't done the task he should have done, you know, but the deadline hadn't been met, but he still hadn't done it early. Whereas I would quite like to get things done early and get stuff sorted. And I was like, he hasn't done it, he hasn't done it, he hasn't done it. And she was like, and will he do it in the end? And I said, well, of course he'll do it in the end. He's just not doing it like I would do it. And she's like, yeah, but you both do things differently.
Mm.
And that really stuck with me, the fact that he has his way of doing things and I have my way of doing things. And we both do them well, and we both achieve what we need to achieve. And I can't tell him how to do his job, and similarly he can't tell me. So actually the dynamic is interesting, because there will be times we argue, and we've worked together since 2005, so we've worked together for 18 years. Clearly work causes arguments, because we'd be, you know, ridiculously saintly if it didn't. And there are times in the office, you know, and you'll have seen it, where yes, he's walking going, what, these shots, what have your team done here, this is terrible, you know. But it's always about the project, it's always about the program, it's always about the quality.
Yes.
It's never, oh,
Yes.
you really annoyed me over the breakfast cereal
Yeah.
this morning.
Yeah, he doesn't let emotion gets in the way in that way. No, definitely.
No. And
And
so,
neither do
and
you, actually.
no, and they're it's very rare. The only person who will ever hear if I'm annoyed with Matt on a personal domestic level is Jenny, our head of production.
Yeah.
And she'll hear me go, oh, he's just been really annoying this morning. And she just, you know, she was bridesmaid at my wedding. She's, you know, she knows us as a couple. But I do think that kind of mum and dad feeling, because we are a mum and dad in the office, has, although we're now 100 people, you know, it's a bigger company, I know. Um,
People, good grief.
you know, we hope that some of that family sense has kind of engendered through to
Yeah.
the teams, and so therefore that kind of idea of family looking after each other, and even with family come arguments and stress and all of that stuff, it's sort of, that's the atmosphere we still hope we can hang on to.
Any of that family feel that you have in the office, and I didn't realize you had grown it to 100, because when I was there it wasn't that big, but it was, you know, it was still a force to be reckoned with. But do you think some of it's because you're not in London, because again you've defied the rules that way as well? You haven't gone a set up, I mean, I know you have offices in London, but you're predominantly in Southampton, and do you think any of that has played an impact or not?
I think, you know, we've had, okay, so the out of London bit has huge impact. We do have a small office in London, we have a small office in Bristol, but the main base is Hampshire. And we do hand pick our people.
Mm.
And I have a really kind of simple philosophy of we only work with people we like, because we're in Hampshire, because actually the people who come and work with us tend to stay a bit longer. It's not such the kind of freelance culture where people move around all the time. And often people who come and work with us want to stay
Yep.
because we're safe, we're nice. And I think the out of London thing does have an impact. And there was a really amazing piece that somebody who worked with us for a number of years wrote in a newspaper, and she said that she'd been in London and had some really bad experiences because of that slightly harder freelance culture. And it was only when she came to us that she was able to grow, and we were able to give her a safe space to fail, because we're okay at failing. You know, we're okay at people failing because then they try again and they learn, and all of, you know, failure is a good thing, and we embrace that. And because we're not as competitive, perhaps because there aren't as many people down here to be as competitive with, that sometimes helps. That we genuinely do nurture and grow, and it's in our interest to nurture and grow people. So we have two schemes with Solent University, one which is in post-production, one which is in production management, where we give graduate prizes and awards, and we take it paid interns who, you know, so we have the Woodcut Media post-production award, so the graduate wins it and they come and do a paid internship. We then grow them into an assistant editor who then turns into an editor. And that has been hugely successful for the past few years. We've just started that with production management. So it's a different vibe, I think, is the answer. But equally, now post-COVID, actually a lot of our people don't live here. You know,
Mm.
out of the 100 people, probably about 25 of them are in America.
Wow.
Loads of them in Manchester, loads in Wales, some in kind of the northeast, a few in London. So Woodcut is a very spread out company now. But what we do is, you know, work really hard to keep that kind of family feel. People do come to Eastleigh every so often. You know, we have Woodcut days every quarter where everybody comes down for the day and we have sessions and meet each other. And one of our team does a pub quiz or something. And, you know, so we try and keep that friendly, family, nice culture, which is important.
Which I can testament to. I loved working with you guys. I really did. And one of the things that I think is really important is everybody talks about this kind of remote working, work from home, like how amazing is it that we now get to do this in our industry. And I wrote about it a fair bit. I truly believe our industry was probably one of the last to have ever willingly adopted working from home. It was always this bum on a seat culture. You guys never had it. So to you, you never had that like requirement to always be in the office. You were very, very flexible. One of the reasons why I think a lot of people wanted to work for you was because there was that trust. So it's interesting how everybody's now talking about this return to work and the fact that the industry is now going to move backwards. What's your take on all of that?
So we didn't ever have it because we always wanted to work with the best people. And working with the best talent meant sometimes they didn't necessarily live next door to your office, and that's fine. And I would rather people were rounded human beings with lives
Mm.
working for us rather than stressed out people who are commuting 2 hours each end of the day. Um, and actually, you know, I distinctly remember one parent when he had been working in London consistently and then came to work for us. And I remember him standing there saying to me, Kate, you've changed my life because I can take my kids to school. It shouldn't be a bonus that you get to take your kids to school. It should be something that if you choose to do it, you choose to do it. And I think that's the whole point, it's choice. So our flexible working policy isn't everyone has to work from home. Our flexible working policy is, well, you work the best way that you work as an individual. And so there are people who do part-time in the office, and that could be a London office or Hampshire office, or there are people who work full-time from home because they are simply too far away and then come down for special days and that kind of thing. And then there are some people who choose to be in every day. You know, Jenny, our head of production, chooses to be in every day because for her, she enjoys being in the office and finds that's the most productive use of her time. For me, I spend a day in Hampshire, a day in London, 2 days at home, and then 1 day floating between somewhere. And that's the best, most productive use of my time. And and also it's not just about where we work, it's when we work. So we have this kind of philosophy of you're a grown-up, and if you need to go to the doctors, if you need to pick up your child from school, if you need to go to the school nativity, if you need to go to the gym or walk for your mental health, do it. Make up the time another time. And that's very much our belief. And it is more difficult, and I will be honest, as you grow and you start working with people who you don't know quite as well. So, you know, Woodcut, I've always known everyone really well. You know, I know who they are, where their family are, what, you know, their marital status is, what their birthday, you know, their aspirations. I've
You've gone
known
to more weddings than I know anybody else.
I know the people, but as we get bigger, it's harder, and that trust is harder to give. But I do believe if you give trust, you're giving it back. But sometimes, you know, people know I often start work at 6 a.m, and I will do an hour at 6, clear my emails, get stuff sorted, then go and do girls' breakfast, pack lunch, take them to school, then carry on. And I work my kind of life around my working hours, and it kind of works in that way.
Yeah.
And so do other people. You know, we have
I've adopted that as well. It's been a game changer getting up before my daughter.
Oh, it's amazing. If I had to say one thing to working mums, should you do? And this isn't me being a CEO saying, oh, yes, no, I get up at 5 every morning, do my yoga, do this. And it's not that. It's just like practically you get a lot done between the hours of 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Before, if your daughter, you know, I don't know what time she's waking up because she's 3, but, you know, if you're blessed and she sleeps till 7, that's an hour of such valuable you time, whether that's work emails, whether that is actually this morning, it's my birthday today.
Oh,
and
I did not know that. I wish you were doing this podcast on your birthday.
But I was super proud of me and Matt. So Matt and I kind of like woke Matt up at 6. I was like, right, you're getting up with me and we're going to do yoga together. And we actually did yoga before the girls got up. And that felt amazing because it is a little bit of me time. And me time can translate to going for a run or doing yoga or watching TV. But also me time for me is sometimes just catching up with my emails.
Yeah.
Because then that sorts my head out and makes me feel a little bit more in control of what's going on in my crazy life.
You do have a crazy life, an amazing one, an inspiring one. Just a couple of other questions I just wanted to ask you before I let you go. So the industry is exciting. You've been in it a long time. You've seen massive highs and I'm sure enormous lows, COVID, I'm sure being one of them, which was obviously a very challenging part for everybody, but also for our industry. 2023 for most people have also been extremely difficult. There's been a lot of talk. I won't go into it, you know, all the reasons why. What's your projections for the industry? Where do you think we're going? There's lots of talk about AI, there's lots of talk about redundancies. Well, there's a lot of redundancies, but where do you see it going in the next 12 to 18 months?
In the next 12 to 18 months, I think we're heading back towards a period of stability. We're not going to be in the boom. So what we had the COVID crisis, which was, you know, oh my goodness, I cried every day for a week on the first week of lockdown because I didn't know how I was going to cope with everything. And we got through that, and that's all good. And then we went into a massive purple patch where production was crazy busy. Everyone was busy. No one was able to take holidays. Every freelancer was in demand and everything was, you know, as the best it could get. And now we've done a nosedive and somehow we're going to correct. So the nosedive of the past few months has been very painful for both freelancers and production companies. we're very lucky as Woodcut because we have returnable series. So we haven't been as impacted as other production companies. But I do know there are some really good, talented people who've been struggling and unfairly struggling. What I think is going to happen, and I don't think this is going to happen in September, there's a sort of a sense that, oh, everything's going to get better in September. I don't think
Yes.
it. I think
Yeah.
it's going to get gently better in September.
Yeah.
That the deals will start coming, the commissions will start coming, the jobs will start then coming. But I think it's going to not really be back to normal until sort of February, March next year, if I'm truthful. And when I say normal, that's not the purple patch. That's somewhere in between,
Mm.
of a kind of, business as usual before COVID. However, there are big seismic changes coming, and there are two things. Firstly, AI, and I have no idea how to predict what AI is going to do, because none of us really understand its potential yet.
No.
So I don't know if that's going to make me lose my job or not. If I'm honest, I have no idea. I'm still learning like everyone else is. The other thing is the other impact of what we've had in the last couple of years really taking shape, which is the platforms changing, the networks changing, the mergers and acquisitions, the sort of, Warner Brothers and Discovery merging had a massive impact on TV last year, and especially in America, which then trickles down to us. Disney making changes, Netflix have been making changes, and then naturally our terrestrial channels are going to be making changes in the next few years. And my question is whether we're going to need as much content in the next few years as we traditionally have. As linear TV really does start to decline, that needs new content every day. Actually, a platform doesn't need new content every day. A platform needs new content every week. So by the kind of, as the platforms change, the need and requirement for content, I think, will reduce slightly. So that will become some kind of new normal. But I don't think it's going to be a drastic drop. I think it's going to be a just gentle decline. But by that point, AI will have created something none of us could have expected.
Mm.
And there'll be some amazing new revolution in the world of media, that will come out of nowhere, and there'll be a whole new, the jobs that our daughters will do really don't exist now. And I know that's something everybody says, but they really don't exist
No.
now, because we can't predict the future. As long as we all remain kind and optimistic,
Yeah.
hopefully we don't burn the planet in the meantime.
That's a whole other podcast.
That's just, it's because it's my birthday. I'm dwelling about the future of humanity.
Keeps me up at night. And just lastly, before I let you go, just what tip or advice, or if you could speak to yourself 20 years ago, 30 years ago, at the beginning, as so many people listening to this podcast will be, what advice would you give yourself, your future self? Don't do it.
Okay, so I wouldn't do anything differently. I'd do everything exactly like, I learn by my mistakes, because I wouldn't be who I am without having gone and done a few rough and tumbles and had those moments where, I've nearly lost the company several times. I've had, there've been moments where I'm on my bedroom floor in tears, not knowing what to do next. And then there are amazing moments that you just can't imagine, that you think, how on earth have I got here, and why am I so blessed? So yeah, keep on doing it, keep taking every opportunity. That's the only thing, is taking every opportunity. And as you get older, you need to keep taking those opportunities until you're not able to. From a really practical point of view, if I'm talking to women, save money for your maternity. I know that sounds really, if I'm talking to somebody in their 20s, and I think I probably said this to you when you were trying, save money for your maternity, because that's when you need it. And the freelance world of TV isn't friendly to women who've had babies. And I think that for me is probably the one thing I didn't do. And also start your pension earlier. I didn't.
Really wish I'd started earlier.
So those are things like practical money stuff, maternity, save for it, pension, but the rest of it, take every opportunity you can, because you only live once.
Words to live by. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, Kate. I really, really appreciate your time. You're a very busy lady. Thank you very, very much. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care. Lots of love. Bye-bye.